WDET, Detroit Public Radio. I'm Robin Vincent. Over the past decade, homelessness has been down in Oakland County, but over the last 3 years, it's been trending up again. 2024's point-in-time count found that about 1,700 people were homeless in Oakland County. Now, last week, the county conducted its latest count, and we don't have the official results yet, but we do know recent trends across the state and the country. According to Ryan Hertz, chronically homeless individuals are more frequently being housed. But the CEO and president of Lighthouse says the number of families that are homeless is on the rise.
We've seen a pretty significant trend in recent years of an increase in overall individuals experiencing homelessness, both counted on the street and in emergency shelters in our community. And the bulk of that increase has been attributed to an increase in homelessness among parents with children. We've actually made some significant headway when it comes to single adults and other subpopulations, including chronic homelessness, thanks to the success of prior investments in Housing First programs. But this particular population, we are seeing an increase.
Why do you think this particular population, why do you think parents with children are experiencing homelessness more often? Is it the cost of everything going up? Is it the lack of housing available? What is the problem?
I think the reason we're seeing an increase in that population is that we're, in general, seeing a significant increase in our housing affordability crisis and the impact of that crisis. And when you talk about working families, they're just more likely to fall into that scenario.
Because there's more costs.
They have more mouths to feed. Right. They have more costs. Yeah. Their rent's higher if it's a larger apartment. And it's often still a single head of household bringing income into those households. So if that individual is low to mid income and they have more costs in front of them, it's just that much more difficult. And the other reason is that most of the tools that are available to respond, and rightfully so, have been invested in the response to chronic homelessness, or the highest need, most acute situations for a head of household. And there's just less resources available to respond to a homeless family with children.
In terms of the point-in-time count and what folks from Lighthouse saw, what were the experiences of people without homes? Were they sitting in their cars? Were they around with their children around private buildings? Like, where were folks? What were the things they're doing? I mean, it's cold out. Like, what was it like for them?
Yeah, it's a combination. It's intentional that the point-in-time count takes place during the winter because we're more likely to actually capture a larger number of the folks experiencing homelessness in shelters during that time. You know, if we're talking about some percentage of the population struggling with mental health or substance abuse challenges, things have to get pretty rough sometimes for folks to even desire to enter shelter because there may be other reasons why they would prefer to go unsheltered. That doesn't necessarily mean they wouldn't prefer a Housing First solution, but they may not prefer a congregate mass shelter environment and everything that comes with that, whether it's others in the shelter, whether it's the compliance with shelter policies, et cetera. And so at that time of year, we're more likely to count a larger percentage of people, not necessarily on the street. We do have street outreach teams in our continuum of care in Oakland County that are working on street outreach throughout the year and engaging people in attempts to help resolve their homelessness. And so, we're not coming into the situation without that information.
In terms of where people are around Oakland County when they're not in shelters, where is that? Is that in suburbs that have more poverty or more concentrated poverty? Where are folks generally?
Yeah, it's in and near communities where a lot of folks had their last residence typically. So yes, in communities of lower income, we tend to find a larger percentage of folks. It's also in places where there's just convenient places for people who are unsheltered to be. If they do have a vehicle, they may be with their vehicle. We sometimes are able to locate people because they may sometimes have access to a hotel or motel room, and we check some of the locations where people frequently rent rooms to check in and see if there's anybody who's been renting a room who maybe doesn't have a room that night, who's in the vicinity. There's a lot of approaches we've taken over the years to do our best to locate as many folks as we can. It's certainly not a perfect count.
The purpose of a point-in-time count is to get some kind of framework about how many homeless individuals are in a particular area, but that number can change a lot over the year. Why is this method that governments and nonprofits use to understand how many individuals are on the street a good one, a useful one?
Well, that's a terrific question. It is a compliance mechanism, essentially, that communities that receive HUD funding through the Continuum of Care program perform a point-in-time count, and it's usually around the same time of year, very close together, if not on the same night, when in close vicinity to other areas nearby or other continuums of care, so that we're not duplicating our count. The rationale, to some degree, is how can we provide a federal agency with a general snapshot of need across the entire country and across all of the continuums of care that seek to serve folks experiencing housing insecurity.
You noted early in the conversation that you were able to bring down the number of chronically homeless, specifically for folks who are single. How were you able to do that? What was effective in bringing that number down?
As it turns out, and this is a currently controversial topic, housing first as a mechanism, meaning that providing somebody with rental assistance and supportive services, particularly if they're chronically homeless, investing in rental assistance for that person and supportive services before addressing any sort of treatment that might be necessary to resolve that, the cost of success when providing those additional services comes down to the point where there's a cost savings to putting the person in housing than trying to treat them while they're on the street or while they are experiencing the trauma and confusion that comes with being displaced into shelter and not knowing how long they'll be able to be in shelter. So Housing First has been successful to the degree that we've had the capacity to do it. The success rates of the people who we are able to serve with our Housing First programs is high. The challenge is that we have not seen the level of investment necessary to keep up with the need when you look at the macroeconomic environment that folks exist within and the number of people who need Housing First.
Part of the reason that Housing First model, or giving people housing, making sure that that need is satisfied, is controversial is because, at least in part, people believe that there's a lot of different reasons for homelessness and it's not just about housing. Is that partially the answer?
I think people recognize, including Housing First advocates, that there's a lot of different reasons for homelessness, but that housing is the solution, or at least the first line to go down when it comes to resolving that homelessness regardless of cause. I think what's driving it is the belief that providing permanent supportive housing is an enabling factor, and that the person receiving that assistance is not going to be motivated to improve their situation. The data has showed us the opposite. There's a reason why people are chronically homeless, and that frequently includes multiple incidents of homelessness, and it's because if left to their own devices without permanent rental assistance, they are likely to become homeless again. And we've also seen that investments in mental health services, investments in substance abuse services, et cetera, have a much higher success rate when a person is housed. The underlying assumption, I think, is more rooted in the belief that people might take advantage of the resource than it is in, a specific reason that the person may have been initially displaced.
This is The Metro on WDET. I'm producer Sam Corey, and I'm speaking with Ryan Hertz. He's the president and CEO of Lighthouse. We're discussing Oakland County's point-in-time homelessness count, which happened last week. Wayne County is doing their point-in-time count this week. Ryan, I want to talk to you a little bit about how folks in the area and across the country view people who are homeless. There are a lot of people who believe that homeless people are honestly worthless, as using resources in a way that's wasteful and not being productive members of society. As somebody who works in homelessness services and tries to get people housing, I do wonder why you think people view individuals who are homeless in this light.
What a terrific question. I've come to believe that it is a matter of subconscious self-protection, that if a person believes that the reason that they are financially stable and they have a roof over their head and are able to put food on their plate for their families, if that person believes that that's that way because it's been merited, then there's a belief that it's secure, right? If I believe that the reason that I'm in such a position is because of my hard work and my merit, and if somebody else, much more unfortunate situation, would only do what I'm doing, they'll be fine. They would be able to do the same. that belief insulates us from the fear of losing all of that.
Yeah, it gives us a
That
sense
some
of
that
control.
Exactly. Maybe some of that is not in our control. And I think the recognition of much is far beyond our control. And when you really look at big numbers, the majority of people we're serving are situationally homeless. Many of them are currently employed or have been employed for extended periods and are hardworking contributors to our community. We just simply have an affordability crisis. We're rent burdened, and we have people who are vulnerable.
Is this a uniquely American thing to both want this kind of control, but also to believe, as you're stating, that I did everything on my own, or that at least I am making the right choices and therefore I am rewarded for it, that merit is guiding my life in a very strong way?
Well, I certainly wouldn't say it's entirely unique to our country. I think it's a matter of degrees. I think that we have forces within our country that reinforce these ideas, and we have forces in our country that reinforce the ideas that we are responsible for one another and need to look out for one another. I think what's perhaps unique in our country is the particular balance of those forces, and that we tend to see a lot of messaging that reinforces the idea that we are in control of our own individual destiny and that that's what we're responsible for. And while we don't wish ill on anyone else and we help where we can, that it's fundamentally up to everyone to take care of themselves. I think that there's a lot of really great things that come from that belief. And there's a lot of ways that that really encourages a lot of people to accomplish many incredible things. And I think that there's a dangerous element to that in that it causes us to lose our sense of humanity for others and to overlook the reality that we just don't know and don't understand why another person might be in the situation that they're in. The other thing that it does is it causes us to overlook the incredible value of the people that we're underinvesting in. When you look at any economy, anytime you add a high-income job to that economy, you're adding 4 to 6 low to mid-income jobs to support that household that's a higher-income household when it comes to their needs in the economy. And so all of our businesses actually need everyone who's a part of that ecosystem. And if we don't recognize that low to mid-income workers, having them rent burdened is a liability to our local economy.
I'm sure you've come across people who, disagree with this, who disagree with your points, who believe that if someone is homeless, that they're ultimately lazy, they're not working hard enough, that they're wasting resources and they're not adding them. What do you say to that kind of person? Or how do you approach someone who has that perspective?
It's a good question, certainly dependent on context. But generally speaking, the conversation can clarify, where is this belief coming from? How do you believe this belief serves you and our community if we use it as a foundation for policy and how we engage with one another? How do you think it reflects on your values and how you respond to a person who's homeless, regardless of what your belief might be about why they're in that situation? I've encountered people who have heard the argument that it's actually economically more efficient to house people than it is to have a street population in their community, that there are costs to society of not housing people, and the cost of housing a person is less than the cost of not housing a person. Somebody might hear that and say, wow, I hadn't considered that, and I'll think differently now. And another person might say, I don't care if it's more expensive because it's not fair that I need to pay my rent and they don't have to pay theirs, right? So it really depends on the person's set of values and how far they extend their sense of concern beyond themselves.
Wayne County is doing its point-in-time count this week. What do you expect from that count? Do you think they'll find a sort of similar phenomenon of more parents with children who are homeless than the year prior?
I do. We've seen a trend in that direction over several years. And the reason I believe they'll also see that is because it's both a statewide and a national trend. When you look at last year's numbers nationally, it's a pretty dramatic shift, unfortunately. And when you think about all of the assumptions that we have around homelessness that might drive policy that does not contribute to long-term solutions, a lot of those arguments fall apart when you're talking about children. At our organization, We have 2 separate shelter programs, one for families with children with an adult head of household, and one for unaccompanied runaway and homeless youth. And the reason we're focusing that way is certainly not because there isn't need for shelter for single adults, but because we see that there needs to be more shelter available for families that include children or for unaccompanied youth, and that there need to be pathways for those families to succeed so that their children's experience of homelessness is brief, quickly resolved, and with as little trauma as possible so as not to continue to compound the problem for future generations.
Staying on policy for a second, the Trump administration has proposed making changes to the Department of Housing and Urban Development, which could have put a lot of people who otherwise would be homeless in jeopardy of losing their shelter because of the way the administration wanted to move money around, essentially shifting away from a housing first model that we've talked about here and you've been championing. What has been the impact of the Trump administration on the homeless population in Michigan thus far? Has there been any policy or executive order change that has shifted things for homeless individuals and the work that y'all do?
First, I'll say that even beyond housing, you can imagine that a person who's at the point of homelessness where they're not able to keep a roof over their head is also impacted by resource limitations in every other sphere of their life, right? And so the entire debacle around SNAP benefits obviously impacts people who are homeless or housing insecure as well, and that's extremely stressful. The impact on access to health care, of course, in the various iterations that's been a policy concern. And then on the housing front, while we have yet to see the new notice of funding opportunity actually roll out, as there's a current court order that has compelled HUD to renew prior year grants under the 2-year NOFO that had been previously approved, there's still uncertainty on the horizon, and that uncertainty has a real impact on the psychology of the people that we're serving and their sense of security and their ability to focus on stabilizing their lives for the future. It's also impacted the organizations that serve people because just the degree of uncertainty makes it extremely difficult to invest in anything long term, whether that's affordable housing investments, whether that's investing in staff capacity to provide the supportive services that come alongside Housing First programs. In general, when policy moves quickly and rashly in different directions, it's bad for business because people keep money on the sidelines because they don't know what to expect next. That's also true in the social services field.
Lighthouse CEO and President Ryan Hertz, he spoke with the Metro's Sam Corey. Wayne County's point-in-time count happened yesterday. We'll let you know when more information is published on the number of homeless individuals in Metro Detroit. It's the Metro on WDET. I'm Robin Vincent. Coming up, Tia Graham turns to the people who make Detroit look and feel like Detroit, the artists. She'll talk with 2 working artists about what it actually takes to survive here. This is WDET-FM, Detroit Public Radio, your connection to news, music, and conversation. And this is the Metro. We'll be right back after the news.